murder you, Casey.
Listen.
Nope, I'm gonna murder you.
Well, okay, but...
No, I'm mad at you. I'm mad at you.
The thing you have to understand
No.
is that I did it for love.
No. You did it because you need somebody to cry over it with you.
That's what love is.
No, that's not love. I am going to make you a member of the London Shades because you're going to be dead.
Seems a little extreme to me.
Not really.
That's fair.
Welcome to This Is Lit, a podcast where we drink and talk about our favorite books. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Casey.
So raise a glass and let's get started.
Okay, Liz, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking Aphrodite from Somerset Ridge because we're about to release a new one of it, and so I'm breaking into the bottles I have hoarded in my basement.
So that's a rosé?
Yes, it is our take on a dry French rosé made with the Cabernet Franc grape, and they take the skins off. Yes, they take the skins off a little early to give it that nice rosé color, so you get a nice kind of citrusy, grapefruit kind of aroma in the finish.
Did I try that one? I think I tried that one.
I don't know. Do you want to? You can still try it.
I promise I don't have the flu.
That's okay if you do. We're at that level in our friendship.
Oh yeah, this was the one I didn't like that just tasted like super
You
dry.
didn't like it.
Well, I like
I love
grapefruit, so.
I love it. What are you drinking, Casey?
I'm drinking an unholy concoction. As you may recall, one time you brought the Concordia grape, or the Concordia wine from your winery, which is just like adult grape juice, and I thought it was too sweet. So we thought we would make a wine spritzer, if it were, a wine cocktail.
Yes.
And I put some dark spiced rum in it.
What color would you call that?
The blood of my enemies.
That would be a good color for your wedding.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, it would.
It'd go really well with that turquoise and that purple.
I'm into it.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll take a picture of it and send it to your fiance.
But yes, this is it's got Concordia grape wine and a couple shots of spiced rum, and then it's topped off with Sprite because it was really, really bad at first, and now it is just kind of fizzy and weird tasting.
We are not professionals.
We shouldn't be. None of what we should do should be taken under advisement.
No.
This is not a recommendation.
No.
This is bad. Don't drink it. I'm going to, but do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
So,
like getting your friend into a series of novels, getting them emotionally invested in a relationship, and then having it end on a horrible cliffhanger.
Today we are reading the second book in Maureen Johnson's Shades of London series. It's called The Madness Underneath. So where we last left Rory at the end of the first book,
she was a human terminus after she had survived an attack by the ghost Jack the Ripper.
Well, the guy who was pretending to be Jack the Ripper.
Yes,
he had turned out to be Alexander Newman. He had turned out to be someone who had previously been in the Shades, and after a near-death experience, became afraid. And wanted to have a terminus for himself whenever he was fired from the company. They wouldn't let him have one. He killed all of them and died in the process of escaping.
So now Rory has survived a horrible, horrible attack on her life, and an attempt on her life. And she is basically told...
This never happened.
Yeah.
You never met these people. Boo, Callum, Stephen. You don't know them. You can never talk to them again. You're not going to go to this school anymore. You're going to go back to where your parents are teaching in Brighton.
In Bristol.
In Bristol. And you're going to forget any of this ever happened. We told the public that it was a real human being who was a copycat murderer, attacked a student in the bathroom. We didn't tell them who it was. And they jumped in the river to flee us, and they drowned. So as far as the public is concerned, it's all over and done with. But Rory is still dealing with a lot of trauma, not to mention not being able to discuss it with anyone, including her therapist.
Yes, and so if we had to summarize this book in a couple of sentences, I would probably say...
Rory deals with trauma following her ghost encounters from the first book, which leads her to getting mixed up with some very shady people, and ends up with... Well, we'll save that.
Yes.
We'll save that. Ends up with quite a cliffhanger, quite a tragedy on her hands.
Yes.
Because of who Rory gets involved with during the next few months.
Yes, and murders in London begin to happen again.
Yes. The book actually starts with one. It starts with a man getting murdered in the basement of his own establishment, the Royal Gunpowder Pub. by what everyone in society thinks is his employee, who is just a recently sober man.
Yes.
But what later turns out to be, of course, another ghost.
Another ghost.
Rory believes...
Rory is returned from Bristol.
Well, no,
to
because
London.
the first thing that happens with Rory is she's in Bristol, and she's, dealing with the fact that she's at her therapist's, and her therapist is asking about all these things.
Which she can't have any kind of decent amount of actual therapy because she can't talk about what actually happened.
She can't talk about her real trauma. She can only talk about, like, the version of trauma that everyone's been told about. So she's not getting anything out of therapy. And she's told her therapist that she just wants to go back to school.
Which it sounds like with this reading that Maureen Johnson has experienced bad therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was quite precise.
Yeah, it was very on the nose.
Side tangent alert. Have you ever experienced bad therapy?
Oh. Yes. What happened was I saw a school therapist, and then I moved across the country to Tennessee because of my mom's job. And while we were in Tennessee, the school counselor there, I guess, contacted the school counselor at the old school, found out about my stuff, and grabbed me out of a line that was walking through the hallway from class to class and pulled me into her office and tried to make me talk to her about it.
No.
Which is, A, a huge HIPAA violation.
Massive.
And B, for a 9-year-old who is still recovering from trauma, it's
Wait,
an absolute disaster.
You were 9 and she did this to you?
Yeah.
Because that's like right at that age where you're just like trying to fit in, and then it's like she made it very like publicly clear to all of your peers that there is something wrong.
And like just like literally physically being grabbed from behind by a stranger and like taken into a dark room.
Never do that.
It was very messed up. And then she starts asking me all these questions about it, like saying details that she had no business knowing. And I left in tears. My teacher called my mom. She picked me up from school early. That counselor and the counselor from the other school both got fired from their jobs.
They should.
It was a disaster, and I have not really been back to much therapy since then.
I don't blame you for that.
What about you? Have you been to bad therapy?
My bad therapy was high school. High school guidance counselors seem to be a theme. So yes, if you are of the high school age and you're listening to us and you think your guidance counselor is a piece of shit, they probably are.
Some of them are good.
Some of them are good.
But not all of them.
Mine,
and they've got a lot of kids to deal with.
Mine told me that there was no reason for me to pick any kind of college major because I wasn't going to make it. And then I graduated 6 years later with a master's degree.
What the fuck?
I know. And, but since then I have been to some very good therapy. So therapy can really make all the difference. And it really comes down to that relationship you have with your therapist. If you have an open, trusting relationship, then it's a great situation. If it's I'm going to grab you and drag you in a dark room and make you talk about feelings you don't want to talk about, that's a terrible relationship.
Yeah.
Side tangent over.
Side tangent over because there are no good therapists in this book.
No good therapists in this book.
I think her therapist in Bristol means well, but she really doesn't have all the pieces she needs to...
No, and part of that is not necessarily Rory, but a lot of it is the whole Secret Government Information Act that she had to sign. Thank you for.
So the therapy isn't necessarily bad because it's a bad therapist. In that case, it's more the therapist does not have all of the details.
Everything they need to work with. Yeah.
To work with. So Rory leaves therapy. She's thinking about how depressed she is, how she misses her friends, how she especially misses Stephen, Callum, and Boo because they're the only other people who can see ghosts and who know what she's going through.
Which I understand her parents wanting her to be closer to them, but also taking their daughter out of any kind of familiar environment would be so isolating.
Well, sure, but like from the context that they know, she got attacked in the bathroom at Wexford.
Yeah, so obviously Wexford is not safe for your child.
Wexford is not a place not only is it not safe, like physically, she got almost murdered there, but also like mentally for her, like it can't be good to be hanging out there.
No.
And so she's back in Bristol. She's very depressed, and she meets a ghost.
Yeah.
Sitting on a bench in the park, just kind of by himself, and she tries to talk to him. And when he realizes that she sees him and talks to him, he lurches away from her. He tries to run, and she grabs his arm.
And he
evaporates.
Disappears because she is a terminus.
And she had not been, at this point, she had convinced herself that the one girl in the bathroom at the end of the last book was a fluke. And
after
now that
this one, she can't do that anymore.
after this, she can't do that, and she goes home and starts trying to figure out how she could find Boo or Callum or Steven. Looking up on the internet, can't find any of them. And
but
then,
she remembers the old apartment.
yeah, the old apartment address. And so she finds the apartment address, calls the shop downstairs, and finds out that Callum and Steven have moved.
Yes.
So she's basically in the dark. She's feeling even more depressed than she was earlier in the morning. And then her therapist calls a group therapy session with her parents.
Yes, which normally is never a good thing.
And the therapist is like, last time Rory was here, she talked about how she wanted to go back to school. And I think as a psychological person, this is definitely psychiatrically healthy for her. And she should definitely go back to school. And you should not question me on this at all.
Huh? But, to be fair, this is some bureaucratic bullshit at this point. Because they're like, well, we're going to go through her therapist and make it be like, yes, her therapist suggests going back to London.
But obviously you figured out by now what happened was
yes.
that the government told the therapist she needs to be back at Wexford and you need to make it happen.
And so after all of that, they're like, okay, well, if she decides to come back to Wexford, it's her choice. Which, really, what other choice does she have, kind of a thing. Which is, again, bureaucratic bullshit.
Yeah, this entire book, Rory... Well, it's
Rory
not the entire
is
book.
pulled in
For
so
the
many
entire,
different directions.
The entire first half of the book, Rory is kind of on the whims of everyone else. But then when she makes choices for herself, they turn out very, very badly. So it's kind of a complicated situation in that way. Because she does go back to London. She does go back to Wexford. Finds out she is horribly behind on everything. And eventually wakes up to a text message at 2 o'clock in the morning from Steven just saying, come outside.
Yeah.
Which...
She trusts Steven.
She trusts Steven, and we've talked about Steven in the past. We really enjoyed Steven in both the prequel book, which was solely about him, and in the first book.
You should see the face I'm giving Casey right now. And she's smiling.
I'm not.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
smiling out of sadness.
I didn't know you could do that.
So Steven in the first book and Rory have a fun relationship, which is very much him being like very by the book and kind of beleaguered as she just like runs off and does her own thing. But it's very subtle.
Yes,
but there's still kind of an element of...
I believe in the last episode, I proudly proclaimed that I shipped it hard.
Which is true. It's interesting though, because after reading the last book and then rereading this book, it's never blatant in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Like in the first book, it's even very like much subtext. It's just like he's kind of beleaguered by her.
Okay.
And like he kind of just goes along.
Subtext was not a thing. Half of the fan fiction would not exist.
Well, sure, but that's not what I'm even saying. This is not a criticism. This is a compliment, because a lot of times you get characters and they're like flirting with each other from the beginning.
It's so beautifully subtle. It's fantastic.
It's very subtle. Like Steven is very straight-laced, but he kind of starts to loosen up when he's around Rory. He's more likely to take jokes and make jokes, and even whenever he doesn't agree with her impulsive decision-making, he tends to go along with it to keep her safe.
Yes.
And it's kind of like an indulgence thing. It comes across as just like, I'm fond of this person. But it's a very sweet thing. And in the second book,
southern charm.
And in the second book, it definitely starts to ramp up. He shows up outside of her dorm at 2 in the morning and takes her across town.
One of the lines is like, I know, that Rory says is like, I know if I'm with Steven, I know I'm safe.
Yeah, she says that several times.
Yes.
And so she goes out with him, and he takes her across town to a tube station where Thorpe is waiting. Mm-hmm. And there is a ghost of a jumper on the tracks. Mm. And she is begging to be released by a terminus. And Steven's like, can you help her? And Rory's, rightfully so, in my opinion, absolutely furious with him. She's like, I've just figured out that I have these powers. So now I have for certain confirmation that I was brought back to Wexford because you guys were watching me and found out I have these powers.
And now you're dancing monkey.
And now you're making me do it for Thorpe over here. This woman maybe does deserve to get to move on, but you want me to do it in front of Thorpe to show to show what? That I'm worth your time? And she turns around to walk away. And the woman grabs her and disappears, and it makes Rory very ill.
Yes.
Thorpe doesn't see much of it, but he sees enough to... As it turns
know what happened. And as it turns out, as Steven explains to her when they're back in the car, he apologizes several times, and he was like, Thorpe was going to shut us down. I had to show him that even though we don't have terminuses anymore, termini, we are still valuable as an organization. In this book, termini is the plural of terminus. It was answered in the book. Thank you, Maureen Johnson.
Listen to our podcast.
Please do. Oh my gosh, there's so much I want to learn from you.
But
your writing is incredible.
So Stephen apologizes and he's like, listen, whenever Thorpe found out the Term and I were gone, he basically was going to shut us down because he doesn't think we can do any good without them. I had to show him that there was some value to us being around still because otherwise we'd all be out of a job. And I didn't tell Callum and Boo because Stephen has the same problem that I do, where he's like a chronic team leader.
What? Really?
What I mean to say by that is, like, if there is a problem and they're in charge, a person like that, like Stephen, or like myself,
No.
immediately is just like, I gotta handle this and I can't tell anybody else about it because I don't want them to be stressed because I want to solve the problem for them.
I feel like that is a trait we share, where it's like we don't want to worry anybody else.
Yeah.
And scare them.
And so that's what Stephen does. Stephen basically just decides not to tell Callum and Boo how likely it is that they're all about to lose their livelihoods. He's like, I'll fix it myself. And so he takes Rory back with him to see Callum and Boo, and she very quickly tells them all of this.
Yes.
And they're kind of pissed at Stephen too, like, you don't have to do this alone. Not only are we your coworkers, we're your friends.
Yeah.
Like, we're basically a family here. We can't talk to anybody else honestly like we do to each other because we can all see this thing and we all know about this thing. And that's kind of what Rory's been dealing with, is not having that. And she's like...
She doesn't have any kind of support system anymore. And, like, she goes back to Wexford and, like, she still has her friends, and she has Jerome, who she does start officially dating, and there's dates and there's all that, but it's like she keeps getting a bigger and bigger and bigger void between her and her friends because there is so much she can't tell them. She can't tell them about the Terminus. She can't tell them about the ghosts. She can't tell them about the weird cracks that are showing up.
Yes, and the weird cracks really she starts to obsess over them in the way that only someone who has truly got some kind of trauma going on can do.
Yes.
There was a crack in the bathroom.
Because you want to deal with something else instead of the thing that's directly affecting you.
So she notices there's a crack in the bathroom where the first ghost came up that she evaporated. There's a crack on the wall of the bar where that man was murdered. And she brings Callum out and tries to show him, and he's like interested mainly because he wants to get rid of ghosts. Callum, as you might remember, is very...
he's very wary of ghosts.
Because one tried to kill him.
Yes, and that's how he got the sight.
His opinion of how to deal with all ghost problems in London is to use a Terminus to send them on.
Can we backtrack real quick? Because there is something I do want to talk about with Rory and her
backtrack noise.
There is something I kind of want to talk about with Rory and her kind of going through trauma, and like she really disassociates with school.
Yeah.
Which really disassociates with school because she's more worried about other things, which she does because she realizes that there's so much more bigger problems going on than my history exam.
Right.
And another thing that she talks about that Maureen Johnson does beautifully is that Rory now has a giant scar going from one side of her abdomen to the other side to the top of her thigh. And she gets really, really, really self-conscious about that. And I'm not going to lie, the part of that book where she was disassociating with school and she was worried about her scars because she hasn't even done anything with a boy yet, I totally get and understand because of when I was really, really sick and I was 17, 18 years old. And so I have a bunch of scars all over my body from stuff that it's stuff that saved my life. But it's still... like, I totally understand that and I get that. And that was a really hard part for me to get through. Yeah. Because I'm like, Rory, girl, I feel ya. Because when I was really, really sick, I'm like, you know what? There's more important things going on than my English exam right now.
Right. Well, and yeah, that's a big thing for Rory. And that's
and I think that Maureen Johnson does that masterfully.
Yeah.
She really has a fantastic understanding of like what it is to go through a near-death experience when you are a traumatic and near-death experience when you are a teenager.
Yeah. No, she does a really good job with it, but it also leads very nicely into how Rory gets herself into the situation she then gets into.
Yeah, she does because she gets so focused.
She gets so focused on one thing, so she calls Callum. She asks for his help. He just wants her to get rid of ghosts for him. He's like, This doesn't seem like a connection. But he mentions it to Stephen, and Stephen's like, what's up? And she's, in the meantime, done all this research. She's like, my school is built on, like, the old Bedlam burial grounds. There are a bunch of mentally ill ghosts whose corpses are underneath my school. And the crack that was created by the Terminus explosion seems to have let them out. And I think there's one in this bar across the street.
Yes.
And Steven...
Another kind of sidebar.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe in the stone tape theory? Where a building that has seen really high emotion, like a lot of joy or a lot of sadness or a lot of pain, tends to retain that. That's why prisons and hospitals and asylums tend to be more haunted than anything else. It's because that kind of memory seeps into the ground.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how much I believe in ghosts. We've talked about this before.
Yes, we have.
I'm always dubious about ghosts, and I'm not sure whether I believe in them or not. But, I mean, places definitely hold the memories of the things that have happened there. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so significant for people to travel to places like Auschwitz.
Yes.
Because I do think places remember. And I think that there are places that, you know, bad things have happened and the land kind of remembers it, or like this, you know, whatever's there.
Yes.
I do believe that to a certain extent. I don't know if I'd believe it so far as to say those places are more haunted, but the logic of it makes too much sense to completely discount.
Okay. I was just curious.
So Rory is basically like, I think that there is a ghost in the basement of this bar across the street, and Steven's like, well, you've done really good research. I find this plausible. I am going to go check it out.
And she's like, you're not going without me.
And she's like, take me with you. And this is the thing that she does so beautifully with the Rory and Steven relationship, because she's never like, Steven is kind of wrapped around Rory's little finger.
No, he's not.
But
he's definitely not. But I like that.
But at the same time, he caves to her whims more than he does to anybody else's.
Well, it starts off with an interview with the guy who they claim is the murderer.
He takes her. He
takes her because
a fake
she's
police officer.
She's like, how is this any worse than anything else I've already survived? And he's like, damn it. Okay, fine.
Yeah, the thing about Steven is he may not be completely wrapped around Rory's finger, but he is willing to let her get away with a lot more than he lets other people get away with. And he doesn't.
He would never let Boo get away with that.
And he doesn't discount her trauma. He doesn't look at her trauma and be like, this means you need to be protected more. He looks at her trauma and he says, this means you can handle more and people should trust you with your own feelings. Which nobody else at the time is really doing.
No one is telling Rory to trust her own feelings. And I think that's where things kind of get
off track.
Botched.
So they go and talk to the guy. It becomes very clear that there was a ghost in the basement of this building.
Yes.
That committed this murder.
And it's unlike any other ghost that Maureen Johnson has previously written about. It doesn't have any kind... All the ghosts we've seen previously look like humans, but there is something off about them. The ghost that is in the basement of this bar is just a black void with glowing eyes and can't even form speech.
Yeah.
And that is a terrifying image to me.
Yeah, it's very scary. And Rory and Steven go, just the two of them, down to handle this ghost, and Rory does get rid of this ghost. Rory uses her Terminus abilities to get rid of this ghost. This entity.
I wouldn't even call it a ghost. And it doesn't seem like it has any kind of...
It's clearly a person. And they even suggest that it's a person that maybe has like some sort of OCD because it gets upset specifically when they move things around in the basement. So she gets rid of the ghost and she immediately basically is like, so anyway, I'm super useful to this organization and I should be involved, right?
Yes. I believe we had this discussion last time where it's like, if we were asked to be a member of the London Shades, if we would. And I'm like, and I think my answer was along the lines of like, my gut instinct says yes in a heartbeat. But then thinking about it, it's like, I would never be able to tell anybody what I'm doing. I would never be able to talk to anyone about it. And that would be really, really hard.
But the thing is, at this point for Rory... She can't talk to anybody about anything anyway.
No.
And the only people that she feels like she can trust are Steven and Boo and Callum.
Yes.
So, in her mind, it's like, that's the only solution that's going to keep me from going crazy. And Steven gets pretty mad. He does. He gets pretty heated, which is not usual for Steven. He's usually pretty level-headed. But he's like, nobody does this because they want to. The people who are doing this are people doing it because we don't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah.
And she's like, do you think I do? Like, I have parents who don't get it. I have friends who, like, I don't even talk to anymore. My boyfriend thinks I'm crazy because I thought that I was going to accidentally kill my ghost friend by making out with them, so I freaked out. I don't have anything else either. And Steven's like, we're not doing this. We're not talking about this. And Steven, it definitely comes across as Steven's like, this is not going to be good for you. It's going to put you into more danger, and I'm not comfortable doing that.
Yeah. Which, you know, it's valid. Because, I mean, Steven's like, what, 18, 19?
Steven's 19 or 20.
19.
Yeah,
19 or 20. So he's only a couple of years older than Rory.
And his entire life is now this, and he doesn't have any contact with family. He doesn't have any friends other than Boo and Callum.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want that for Rory, which is a sentimental, or a nice sentiment. But
Boy Scout syndrome.
But it's not what Rory needs. Rory needs people to stop telling her that she can't take care of herself anymore. And
Rory
this is
needs
also
people
kind
to stop telling her what she can and cannot do.
And this, along with her disassociation of her schoolwork, is kind of what drives her into the arms of Jane Quint.
Yes, who is Charlotte's therapist.
Charlotte has a new therapist that she has been seeing because, as you remember, Charlotte, the prefect...
Yes, the redheaded prefect.
...got attacked by the ghost the same night, got hit with a lamp.
Yes, and even Jazza said Charlotte has been playing quite the victim. But
I think
Rory's
Charlotte's legitimately traumatized.
Yeah, legitimately, because
she got
hit
upside the head.
See a damn thing.
She didn't see what happened. She got hit upside the head, and the next thing she knows, another girl in her building was almost murdered.
Yes.
As far as she knows, it could have been her. Like,
yeah.
I think Charlotte.
Also, too, as far as Charlotte knows, she was hit in the head repeatedly with a lamp by a murderer, so she could have been the one killed. That's what you just said.
Yeah, it's okay. Drinks.
Drink.
No, but I think Jazza calling her quite the victim. Jazza doesn't really understand the situation.
There is
Jazza's a person who is not a victim, and people who are not victims tend to do this thing where they conflate, like, different, like, they don't understand that it doesn't matter how bad it was. To Jazza, she's like, you got stabbed, you almost died. She just got hit over the head with a lamp. That's not as bad. But, like, to people who have been traumatized by things, you know that, like, any trauma is bad trauma. And if you don't need to compare it to somebody else's.
If you have been to therapy, they do tell you that if you say, well, it's like, yeah, I've got it bad, but somebody else has got it worse, that is a way that people use to invalidate your feelings. Your feelings are always valid. The way you react to them is not always valid. So that's a mentality you have to keep. So
at any rate, I don't have a problem with how Charlotte's behaving, but
Charlotte... I totally understand the way Charlotte's behaving.
Charlotte has become an absolute devout follower
of this woman,
Jane Quint, because she goes to her therapy sessions at Jane's. She comes back feeling relaxed, feeling at ease, removed from her problems.
Blissed out, I believe, is the term that Rory uses for her.
And so she gives Rory Jane's card. Said, Jane, I told Jane about you in our sessions, and she would like to talk to you. She doesn't charge anything, so if you need a therapist here in town and you don't want to go to the school therapist, give her a call.
And Rory is she's doing homework one day and then just has a straight up panic attack.
She full on realizes that she's going to fail out of school.
Yeah.
And there's nothing she can do about it at this point. And so she has a full panic attack. She calls Jane Quint.
And she goes over.
And Jane is an absolutely interesting character. She's an older woman with dyed red hair, a proclivity for like exotic design, a very, very large house, a lot of money.
With a background as a designer, Maureen Johnson describes this house, and I just like have the urge to not throw up in the back of my throat.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible.
It's an awful house.
Like, it's like each room is just like another level of decadence.
And I think she's supposed to mainly come off at the beginning as just an eccentric old woman, but Maureen Johnson is masterful in her
There's something not quite right about her.
You always know there's something just not quite right about Jane. She's saying all the right things. She's acting exactly the right way. And everything's going really well. And there's something about you that you're like, something is not right.
Well, and especially how exactly Charlotte...
She understands.
Well, how exactly she understands and how exactly Charlotte's symptoms hit Rory. Like, she feels totally blissed out. It's great.
And it's just... Charlotte,
then this woman is not taking any money from her. She pays for her cab across town. You just get an unsettled feeling in your
Jane
gut.
reveals that she quote unquote touched to death, which I think is a very interesting choice of words.
Yes. A man attempted to murder her when she was a child.
Yes.
And left her body in a shallow pond, and she managed to crawl out and survive. But
she faked drowning.
She developed the sight. Because
but
of that.
you don't know that. She doesn't straight up say that.
She does
At
eventually,
the first.
but not
she
at
does
first.
after. She does it the second session.
Yeah, at the second.
After Rory is just like, I'm failing out of school, and craziness has gone on, and she basically tells Steven, let me join the Shades, and he's like, no, thank you.
And so then the second session rolls around, and Jane tells her that she can also see ghosts. And she tells Rory she's gonna fail out of school. Like, she's actually just spoken to Claudia, the headmistress.
This is a safe house for people with
So what you need to do is run away.
Yeah, run away. Come
you stay
with
here.
Me. You
like
stay
literally,
here.
they want to take her phone, and they do take her phone.
As soon as she's like, you should run away. I believe I was at work stacking shelves listening to my Audible because it was before we opened, and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, I remember texting you and being like, there is something not. I'm listening to the last 5 chapters, and I'm going, something is not right.
And Rory finally starts to feel it too, and Rory says, okay, I'll run away. What do I need to do? They take her...
What's the girl's name? It starts with a D.
Dahlia?
Davina. Davina takes her phone, uses it in a couple places, and literally throws it in the Thames.
Yeah, and then Rory takes all of her money out of her ATM.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's go to the country. Because London is easy enough to hide in, but it would be good for you to get out to the country for a while
Rory
anyway.
She doesn't like the idea of the isolation, but she has Boo's phone number.
So she calls Boo, and she tells her what's happening, to some extent.
Yeah.
And
she says she's running away. She
says she's run away, and Jane is not super thrilled with that.
And Boo tells Rory, hey, we've been trying to get a hold of you all morning. There's been another death. We need your help. So Rory comes, and a psychic has been thrown out the window of her second-story building. Yes.
After doing a reading, onto the pavement, and has died.
And no one saw anybody throw her out the window.
And Rory goes with them to look at this crime scene, which now it's just like, it's hilarious to me because Steven put up such a fuss earlier about letting her in on murder interrogations and
he's been trying to get a hold of her all morning.
And now he's like, here, come into this crime scene.
Yes. Well, I think it's because he realizes how valuable she is, and he's like,
well, and they have a discussion there that he's like, I wasn't trying to be angry with you, I wasn't, and she's like, yeah, I know. But basically they find a set of tarot cards that's spread out on the table, and the only card missing is the Tower card.
Which, you read cards.
I do.
What does the Tower signify?
It's funny because people...
Typically.
People look at cards, and everyone sees the death card.
And gets concerned.
Or the death or the devil card. And they get concerned. They're like, that's bad. It means something bad.
I think the last 3 times you've done my cards, you've pulled the death card for me.
But the thing about death is it's not a bad card. Death is just a card that's about change and transformation, which can be good or bad depending on your perspective and depending on the situation that's changing. Like, I mean, I had a death card in a read a few months ago before I got fired from my job, and I did get fired from my job.
You're having a major change in your life right now.
Yeah.
You're making it as an actress. You're getting married.
Yeah, so... But none of that's bad stuff. So the death card is not all that bad. Everyone worries about the death card, but it's really not anything to be afraid of. Really, the card to be afraid of is the Tower. Because the Tower means calamity and destruction, which there's really no good kind of calamity.
Not usually.
And the Tower card in this particular deck depicts a woman falling headfirst out of a window.
Can you imagine a good kind of calamity? What do you think that would be? A random truck of ice cream just got pulled over on the road and then you're just there with a spoon?
I guess. That doesn't sound particularly calamitous, but...
No.
Yeah.
Okay, side tangent time. I have a friend whose father is a firefighter, so he gets called out to all kinds of things.
Sure.
And there was one time he got called out to this horrible wreck. So this 18-wheeler ended up in a ditch, and it was through no fault of its own. It was like wind or something crazy like that, but it crashed, and it was a liquor truck. So since this liquor was reported, like 80% of the stock in this truck was okay, but since it was reported in a crash, they couldn't then legally sell it. So all the firemen divvied up these boxes and boxes and boxes of liquor.
Amazing.
And then they took it home. And I'm like, that's the only good kind of calamity I can think of. And then she was kind to her friends and shared it with us.
That's hilarious. Well, anyway, the calamity here, the tower card,
is bad.
Depicts a woman falling headfirst out of a window. This particular deck, the art on it does. Much like the woman Dawn, the psychic, fell out of her window.
Yes.
So they're like, well, maybe this ghost is obsessed with symbolism. They immediately assume, it's another ghost.
Yes.
And so Rory leaves the scene and goes back to Jane's house. And Jane has been joined by another friend, a man named Jack.
Who's rather flamboyant. And she is like, I normally have... This is always another good thing, especially if you're female. Always trust your intuition. If something is weird, get out of there.
She sees Jack and she immediately doesn't want to go to the country anymore. Just by seeing him and hearing him talk. She has a bad feeling. She doesn't like it. So she goes into the hallway thinking maybe she'll try and call Boo again. And she sees
Charlotte's jacket.
Charlotte's jacket hanging up and it's still wet.
And it's still wet from her walk in the rain. And Jane tries to play it off as, oh, she forgot it. Or, oh, she came here earlier, but that jacket is soaking. And so it was like Charlotte was just here.
So...
And Charlotte is a house prefect. She would not forget her Wexford jacket.
So...
And she's supposed to be in the middle of an exam.
So at that point, Rory... And at this point, it's been several hours.
Yes.
And Rory is upset, and Jane is like, why don't you have a brownie? We've got all these brownies that we...
Yes.
That she always offers them.
Baked
Goods that she always offers her clients when they come to visit. And Rory is like, what's in the brownies?
Because Jack looks down at his feet and smiles. And that is the giveaway.
And she thinks about how blissed out Charlotte's been. And there's hash in the brownies.
And she's like, I've never done drugs, but I have friends who have, and that's what they described.
And so she discovers that the brownies do have hash in them and that she has been drugged.
Against her will and without her knowledge.
And so she's even more stressed out, and she tries to make a break for it.
She does.
And Jack,
bless her poor little heart,
attacks her. And slams her down on the floor. And Jane actually says, don't hurt her. We need her alive. And they load her into the car to go to the countryside.
Surprise, surprise, Jane is the leader of a cult.
Yeah, she starts talking in this deranged terms about Persephone?
Yes. Well, that is actually the terminus stone that Rory became. Yeah. Persephone was destroyed, so she's now kind of like the goddess of death, but they think...
But no, they've got, where is it? Let me see.
They think that through Rory, they're going to be able to solve...
The Eleusinian Mysteries.
Yes.
Which is, it's the story about Persephone, daughter of Demeter, and how she was kidnapped by Hades.
Which is one of my favorite folktales.
In her honor, the Greeks had the Eleusinian Mysteries, which initiates were shown the real nature of life and death. Now, we think these things are just stories, except, of course, that the ancient Greeks were correct. Death, as you may have noticed, is not the fixed state that most people believe it is. Do you agree? And then she says...
And Rory, who is wedged in the back of the car between Jack and Davina, can't exactly say no.
So this is the next thing Jane says. She says, they may have spun a colorful tale around it, but they were aware of the reality of life and death. Their mysteries, their rituals, they were actually experiments. And those experiments started to bring about changes. They made us, Rory. Those who achieved the highest of the mysteries, the hierophants and the initiates, they developed the sites. They began to perforate the wall between the living and the dead. Somewhere far back in your family history, there was a great mystic, someone who achieved this wonderful state. We are all, in that sense, related. But the great work was destroyed. The temple of Demeter was sacked. The Christians took over, and the mysteries were thought to be destroyed. Knowledge gone. But the knowledge lives on. The rituals continue. Which is why we did what we did this morning to the psychic, of course. So, Rory then finds out...
through 257.
Rory then finds out that Jack is the one who murdered Dawn, the psychic.
Because she associated his Jack being the first name of one of the witnesses who saw Dawn fall out the window.
Yes, and furthermore, Jack was the only one left of the group who needed to pay his quote-unquote blood debt.
Yes.
Because apparently they all have to murder somebody in order to have a better understanding of death.
Who does that sound like? Experimenting with trying to get the sight. Just saying. It's a nice tie back to book one.
Yeah. So basically Jane and her groupies there are cult members, and they're taking Rory out because they believe that she is the answer to all their questions.
And hope seems lost.
And then they get into a car accident.
With a police car.
The car slams into a police car that has just shot out of an alleyway. And they hit the front of the police car, and it stops them. And the door opens, and Steven gets out of the police car.
Yes, I remember reading this at work on my Kindle, and that happened, and I cheered out loud.
So you've got this good-looking young cop with fucking blood dripping down the side of his face, climbing out of this cop's car.
Have you ever noticed that any man who is beat to hell looks far more attractive? Why is that?
Because they're no good when they're healthy.
They're no good. Paul, please do not get in a fist fight to make me attracted to you. I am already attracted to you. It's the beard.
Anyways.
But still.
So
I like Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds beat to shit is real attractive.
I want to read this if I can find it. So Steven has a trickle of blood running down the side of his face, steps out of the car, and walks over to the car. Boo and Callum take out the back wheels of the tires with a crowbar. And he comes up to the car and says, I'd like to get Rory out. She's a minor who's been reported missing. Either she gets out or I assure you that the full weight of the London police force will be brought down to bear on this car. And Jane keeps pushing back, doesn't want to let her go.
Oh my God, that's attractive.
Attractive. And Jane basically says, I'm going to call my solicitor about this vandalization of my car and the assault on my friends. You'll never hear the end of it. And this is what Steven says in response. I look forward to it. You'll be walking home, which will be under surveillance, as will every vehicle registered to it and every person known to have lived under its roof. Nothing you do from now on will be unobserved. On the street, cameras will turn and focus on you. And if anything happens to anyone connected with Rory's life, I'll personally see to it that every moment of what remains of your miserable life is spent in the maximum amount of suffering. He said all of that as if rattling off a grocery list.
That is real attractive.
So Steven kind of fucking loses his shit.
Yeah.
He pulls over this car.
You know how, you can tell when someone is, losing it, but they're trying really hard to be restrained?
Yeah, he fucking loses his shit.
Yeah, he loses his shit. He's like, do not take my Rory.
He's literally like, I will make you suffer if you do anything else to harm this girl. At which point you're just like, okay.
Ship it hard. Ship it hard.
If the subtle shit from the previous chapters has not been enough to get you being... over here.
You just read that and I'm all hot and bothered right now.
if the subtlety of their relationship developing in the last few chapters has not been interesting to you.
Break out the handcuffs, I am under arrest.
Wow, okay. This whole speech and this very protectiveness that comes out here is really very attractive, not just to the readers, but also to Rory.
Yes.
Oh, yes. And so Steven takes Rory and Callum and Boo back to one of his father's apartments.
Yes.
The parents he doesn't talk to, that we know about from the previous, the prequel book, who, I'm sorry, I've got the hiccups.
It's that rum.
Steven takes Rory, Callum, and Boo back to his parents' apartment,
Rory
a safe house.
and Steven have a moment.
They do. They sit down on the bed together, and she says, thank you for saving me. I'm sorry that I ran away. I'm sorry that I wasn't telling you what was going on. And he's like, I'm sorry.
And Rory starts beating herself up over it because she's like, I should have known.
I should have known that I was getting involved with the cult. And Steven's like, you wouldn't have even been involved with them if I hadn't alienated you by saying that you couldn't handle yourself after your trauma, which I did, and I'm sorry for.
Yes.
And it's a really honest conversation. It's very nice because I feel like...
And his shirt's half open and he has abs.
And still got fucking bandage wrapped around his head.
Yeah.
And so it would have been... the fact, and they end up kissing, and it would have been a nice kiss either way, but the fact that they cleared the air between them and were really honest and candid in the conversation beforehand made it much nicer. And Steven is kind of resistant to it. It was kind of more of a,
because her relationship with Jerome was very immature. Her relationship with Steven is a very mature relationship, which I love and adore. And then Callum walks in on them. Steven swears because he was enjoying the
and
kiss.
Callum is like,
I owe Boo money. I'm sorry, Allie's cat is named Bo, so that's why I flip.
But
Hi,
yeah,
Allie.
so he's initially resistant to the kiss, but then ends up kissing back and enjoying it. And so she's all happy, everything's great, and it's like, okay, so we're gonna sleep in the morning. We'll figure this out. We'll solve the problem. It'll be great. She goes to bed,
and then I decided to murder Casye.
She goes to bed, and she wakes up a few hours later to Boo shaking her and saying, I can't wake up Steven.
Steven is rushed to the hospital.
Yeah, so the night before, whenever they'd gotten back, he basically refused any kind of medical help. Just was like, head wounds always bleed a lot, which is true.
They do.
And just wrapped up his head and moved on because he was trying to figure out how to solve the problem, how
And
to
he
get
wasn't
Charlotte
showing
back.
any other kind of symptoms.
Well, and
how
Charlotte's
to get
been kidnapped.
Charlotte back. How to make sure Rory's parents aren't taken or hurt.
To a lot of things to handle. And so he just kind of blows it off. And then the next morning, Boo can't wake him up. And so they rush him to the hospital. And the doctor tells them that he has a hematoma in his brain and that he's not going to wake up. So
I'm going to murder you. So anyway, they all have a major fight.
Well, Thorpe comes in because they can't do anything because as far as the
Steven
hospital is concerned,
has told Callum that he does not want his parents told anything.
if something happens to him.
Thorpe,
And so Thorpe basically comes in acting as his uncle because as far as the
Thorpe
police and
knows
hospital are...
that the three shades, including Rory, have made a decision already.
Yes, and they've decided to take Steven off of life support and let him die naturally because they don't think that he would want to stay on life support.
But Rory thinks if she holds on to him, he will.
Based on her conversation with Alexander in the previous book, the fact that he died holding a terminus and came back as a ghost, and he gave Rory a terminus before she died, or before she almost died, Rory thinks that if she holds on to Steven, if he's in contact with her as a terminus, as he's dying, that he will come back as a ghost.
And see what happens.
And Callum loses his shit.
Callum does not want Steven to be a ghost.
Callum
Callum has
like
a very
ghosts.
poor view of ghosts.
He doesn't think ghosts are natural. He doesn't think they should exist. And he doesn't consider them people anymore.
And Boo sees them as just people on a different plane of existence. There's good ones and bad ones.
So she wants Rory to do this. And so, which is unfortunate because Callum and Boo kind of have a blossoming relationship happening too. And Callum, basically, he walks out before they call security on him.
Yeah. And so when it's left to Boo and Rory decides to hold on to Steven.
While they take him off life support.
Which
is a really intense...
6:43 in the morning.
It's a really intense scenario.
But what happens to Rory is what happens to her when the jumper grabbed onto her without her knowledge.
Yeah. She gets very sick and very dizzy. All the lights in the building power down. The entire place blacks out, comes back on an emergency generator.
Well, of course, when Rory was given the power of the Terminus, the whole foundation of everything within a couple miles of radius cracked.
Yeah.
And the whole bathroom was destroyed. So something significant happened. But it ends with she's going to find Steven, she's going to find Charlotte, and she's going to get her revenge on Jane.
Yeah, because at this point they have not found Steven's ghost or any indication that there is a ghost. And they have no indication that they will ever see Charlotte again.
I'm so mad at you because Steven clearly has passed away and they got one damn kiss. One. They got one. Casey. They got one. And even if he comes back as a ghost, she can't fucking touch him because she's a terminus, and that's only if he comes back.
Do you want to hear something that'll make you madder?
It gets worse.
Well, no. After I finished this, I was thinking about it, and I was like, it's interesting how in the first book, Rory very nearly dies because she agrees to Alexander's demands in order to save Steven's life. And that almost costs her life. And then Steven saves Rory's life in the second book, and that costs him his life. So that was cool.
I'm going to murder you.
Listen.
You're going to become part of the London Shades because you're already a ghost.
So...
I am so mad at you right now.
Okay, so here's the thing, too. This book...
Here's the thing. There's a thing.
Here's the thing.
After the realizing their deep and mature love, and they get one fucking kiss, and then he fucking dies after saving her life of something super mundane, even though he's a fucking superhero?
So this book came out in...
I'm mad at you.
2013.
I am so mad at you.
And the next book in the series, The Shadow Cabinet, which we will be reading...
Yes, because I can't wait anymore.
Worry not, we will be reading The Shadow Cabinet for May, and it...
I finished this 2 days ago, and I made sure not to start the next one until after today, so I didn't confuse anything.
I know, I did the same thing, because I really wanted to go straight into Shadow Cabinet. Shadow Cabinet, if I don't remember the details of it as much, but it deals a lot with Jane and her cult and their attempts to flummox or like beat death. And I think the thing that's
You can't beat death.
Well, here's the interesting thing. The initial response is this cult is bad because they're trying to beat death and because they've killed people, which of course, them killing people, that is bad. But trying to beat death, is it really bad? Because Rory just did the same goddamn thing.
Oh.
Like, she just tried to keep Stephen from dying. Like, how like, to me, it's just very interesting. It's kind of the shades of gray that are here in this conversation.
Okay, I understand how Rory did what she did. I don't believe she should have did what she did.
You wouldn't have done it?
Oh, if it was Paul, in a heartbeat, I would have done it. I'm not saying that that's the right decision.
So you would have done it while knowing it was not the right thing to do?
Yes.
Do you think it worked?
I don't know, because since it was the same thing that happened, well, it was the experience she had was very similar to the one of the jumper.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it even worked. I'm like, I can see it working, I can see it not working. I can see her spending the rest of her life looking for Stephen and not finding him.
Well, we will definitely have to read the next book in the series.
I'm so fucking mad at you.
If I remember correctly, the next book also ends on something of a cliffhanger, not as intense as this. But it does end on something of a cliffhanger, and it is the last book that currently exists in the series.
Can I just say something really quick?
Yes.
Maureen Johnson, if you do ever listen to this podcast, I am in awe of your writing style. I love it. I want to learn more from it. I'm going to keep rereading these books to learn from it, so that way when I actually get a book published, I can do this. Your pacing is masterful.
We should read some of her other books on the podcast.
Before we read her first one, The Vanishing Stair, which was the sequel to Truly Devious, just came out.
Yeah.
And
I haven't read Truly Devious, but I have read them. I have read Sweet Scarlet series, and I have read the 13 Little Blue Envelopes.
Yes, I want to read the one where you were talking about the Spanish ghost.
That is not Maureen Johnson, actually.
Really?
Yes, because I was looking it up.
That's what happens when you drink.
Well, no, it's when you read a lot of YA novels about ghosts. So I think I must have read it around the same time I read The First Shades of London. That is actually Meg Cabot, who did the Princess Diaries series.
Ooh, we should read those.
We should definitely read it. But Maureen Johnson, I'm sorry for confusing you with her Meg Cabot. I'm sorry for not acknowledging you for your amazing book that I loved growing up. Listen to my podcast.
Yes, Meg Cabot, please.
But we should read 13 Little Blue Envelopes and Sweet Scarlet, because those are really good series as well. And I'd love to read Truly
Maureen Johnson is just masterful, where it's like the beginnings are really kind of, you can tell the cogs are starting to turn.
But the last 5 chapters...
You get to the last 10 chapters and you're like, okay, I'm more invested than I was. In the last 5 chapters, you will not even stop to pee to read the last 5 chapters.
Well, I read this in the car with a book light on a ride home from Nebraska at 10 o'clock at night. So it was late, I was tired, I've been working all day, and I had a book light, and I was just in the backseat of a car. My nose up to the page. No, you don't finish.
I was literally going between Audible and my Kindle because I downloaded it both because I'm like, if her last 5 chapters are anything like her last 5 chapters from the last book, I'm not going to want to stop. Mm-hmm. And since I was working, that way I could sync both of them, which Audible Kindle sync has been a godsend.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, yeah, that's a thing. Where it's like you get to where you are in the Audible and then you can sync it with the book and it takes you to the page you're on the Audible.
Nice.
Which is wonderful. And then you can sync the other way, too. Fantastic. So I was like, I literally finished this after I was listening to the Audible, and I got to the point in the Audible where it's like, I can't wake Stephen up. And then
I got a text message. You
got several text messages.
Very angry text messages.
You got several angry text messages. And so, like, I had people come in, so then I, like, had to turn off my Audible, and since we were getting people, I switched to my Kindle, so that way I could, like, read it in between customers. And then I'm like, I remember texting Casye, I'm like, I hate you. I'm crying at work.
She was mad.
I am very mad at you.
But in my defense, The Madness Underneath came out in 2012. And Shadow Cabinet did not come out until 2014. So I had to wait 2 years to read The Shadow Cabinet and find out what happened with Stephen and whether she got her revenge on Jane Quint. I had to wait 2 whole years. You had to wait 3 days. And I really needed someone else to go through this with me because no one else I know has read these books.
Misery loves company.
Now, I will say that this is a 4-book series.
And we have 3 of the 4 out. Maureen Johnson.
The 4th book was supposed to come out, I think, in 2015 or 16.
It's 2019, honey.
Well, she got very sick for a while, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's true. And then
she started writing Truly Devious instead.
Please do not pull a George R.R. Martin and not finish.
I'm sure she will.
I really hope she does. Which, I like to... Oh! There is some lovely fan art of Steven that I am definitely a fan of. We should not look at fan art. By the way, listeners, if you have any fan art of any books you're a fan of, please send them to us on Twitter at Wine Literature is our handle, or you can send them to us through our website at litliteraturepodcast.com.
What? Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
Fan art. We are fans of fan art. We are
I'm
also
sorry,
fans
I'm actually
of
looking
fan
through
fiction.
I'm also looking through fan art right now.
Fan art and fan fiction is a radical feminist choice.
True. But we've gotten off track yet again,
yes,
as we do.
Always.
Liz.
Yes.
How many bottles would you give The Madness Underneath?
How many bottles would I give it? 4. It's not very often where I'm just in awe of Maureen Johnson's writing style. It's fantastic. It's edited beautifully. She has, like, as a writer, I am in awe of her and her talent. As a reader, I've never read a series where it's been really hard for me to wait 2 days to start the sequel.
Yeah, me neither.
So
I would also I'd give it 4 or 4.25 bottles even, because for me, it's about, a lot of it is about Rory and Steven, because here's the thing, from my perspective.
And it's all very human.
From my perspective, as a queer woman, as a queer person, YA novels, almost all of society in general, all entertainment really, but especially YA novels and rom-com movies, have a very rote way of writing these stupid, straight white couples. And, like, I love young adult novels. I've gone on this tangent before. Young adult novels are more emotionally honest than a lot of adult novels.
Yes, they are.
I really enjoy them. But as someone who is queer, it's exhausting that you have to look specifically for a queer book to get something other than stereotypical straight white nonsense romance.
Yes.
And while this is a straight romance, it is a white romance. It's genuinely written. It's not, it doesn't feel contrived. It feels like they really do develop a mutual respect for each other, which then turns into attraction rather than them just being like, here's all of our sexual tension right at the beginning of the book, and it's just going to be underlying everything all the time.
Yes.
And I actually care about their relationship, which I don't often care about the relationships in YA novels. Just because they don't.
Yeah, I kind of give you that.
They're not always written well, and just from the perspective of someone who is not just like interested in a straight relationship, it's just not interesting to me.
I have a friend request to ask you if you have read The Prince and the Dressmaker, or The Dressmaker and the Prince, or something like that. You have?
I have.
She has requested we do it. I told her to go to the Patreon.
Yeah. No, I would love to. I've actually only read part of it. A little kid named Leo was in the last show I was in with me. The kid's about, I don't know, 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And they played the little boy in the show. Like, they actually wanted to cast the little boy as the little boy in the show.
Oh, yay.
And so they cast this kid, and Leo's a real sweet kid. Has a very accepting parents, like, wears basically whatever clothes that they're comfortable in. And, just very cute kid. And came in with that book one day and, like, was showing it to me, and I read a couple pages of it, but I have not finished it. I would love to do it for the podcast.
Yes. She has requested we do it for the podcast. So,
cool.
Hi, Allie.
Yeah. So, so we give the book about 4 or higher bottles. 4 or higher, possibly higher.
Which I think is a first for us. We've had 4s. I think our last 4 was Maureen Johnson.
Yeah, I think our last 4 was Name of the Star.
Yes.
I think I might even like this one better because the mystery and the name of the star is the main focus. But in this one, it's really
Rory.
internal life and her relationships with the people around her, which is very well done.
And I love that it's like Rory makes mistakes. She's allowed Rory to make mistakes. She's allowed Stephen to make mistakes. And sometimes I want to strangle Rory because she's doing stupid stuff. Yes. But she's still relatable and I still care about her. But she's still human.
Yeah.
I love that.
So we really enjoyed this. Like I said, we will definitely be
brilliant. I love this.
We will definitely be reading the third one. Look out for that in May.
Yes, May.
There is no fourth one right now, but I mean, we may do an emergency episode when the fourth one comes out.
Yes, we will totally do an emergency episode when the fourth one comes out. Because Maureen Johnson, if you do that, please listen to our podcast, one. And two, we will do an emergency episode just on your book, and we will probably read it in 48 hours.
From what I've heard, it is supposed to come out this year. Now that she's...
That is me knocking on wood.
Now that she's finished the sequel to Truly Devious, I know she is working on a third book in that series, but I've heard that we can expect Shades of London 4 sometime this year, and if that is the case, we will either have an emergency episode, we'll give ourselves 48 hours to read it and have an emergency episode, or we might do something more fun, we might do a live read. We don't know.
That would be really fun.
If we can come up with something, but you'll hear about it as soon as that fourth book comes out.
Because darling, June 15th is our 1 year.
Yes. God. So keep your eyes open or your ears open for
eyes and ears.
That. But before then, of course, we have to finish out the 3 that are written. So look out in May for the Shadow Cabinet.
The Shadow Cabinet.
And another classic novel, which we have not decided on yet.
Yes, we're going to let you guys decide.
We're going to let you guys decide. So go on our Twitter or our Facebook and tell us your favorite classic novels that you like to read when summer is coming around, when it's just starting to get warm. And we will pick out one of those, and that will be our classic novel for May. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. For more information, visit us at litliteraturepodcast.com or check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And remember, too much work and no vacation deserves at least a small libation. Cheers!